How metakwepe? Ambeti washte. Hello, my relatives. Today is a good day. You know, we Lakota, as you know, as I've said before, every adult male is bound to say their morning thank you prayer every morning. I've been somewhat lax lately, but I fully intend to get back to the daily routine. You know, as evidenced last week I started wearing my braids again. My hair's getting longer, and I'll be back to that next week anyway. So, for this week, I want to talk a little bit about academics. Augustana College of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, last weekend had a academic symposium where they presented papers on the American Indian Movement takeover of Wounded Knee in 1973. We don't call it the takeover because I'm from here. I live 7 miles from Wounded Knee. We call it the siege at Wounded Knee, the siege by the United States of America invading our territory again. At any rate, they had this academic symposium. Now, academics, when they get into their exercises, it's usually, a mutual masturbation society. And that's all it's there for. They're stroking each other and with their papers and their presentation of their papers, which they read. Wow. And it's very dry, and it's taken from other people's writings, and maybe some of their own. But mostly it's, research presented very dryly, reading it. At least that's my experience. Now, of course, what they're taking is the white man's interpretation of what happened at Wounded Knee and why. Okay? In reality, they don't even know why. They do not realize the effects of their own colonialism against us Indian people. They just know we were in the way, they made us get out of the way, and those they couldn't put us on prisoner of war camps called reservations. And it's still military because it's called reservations, because every place the United States of America goes in the world and establishes a military base and or a prisoner of war camp, it's called a reservation. So that's part of it. But the Wounded Knee, you see, the genocide continues. And I gave the keynote address, and there was 2 women or 3 women scheduled to present warrior women at Wounded Knee. A lecture on that. However, they presented some of that, but they went mostly into the survival school of the American Indian Movement that we established back in the 70s. We call them survival schools. We were in 4 different states and 2 Canadian provinces at the time. And they've since evolved into other kinds of schools. We don't call them survival schools anymore. They have their own names. But in some form or another, they're continuing, except in about 4 places they disbanded. Those were urban Indian places. Now, And some of the urban Indian places survived, like the Heart of the Earth school in Minneapolis. Now, all of that, the American Indian movement formed because of the continuing genocide of the relocation program of the United States government. The man they put in charge of the relocation of the Japanese during World War II in the United States was put in charge of the relocation program, voted in with a Democratic Congress and enacted by a Republican administration, namely the Eisenhower administration. And for almost 20 years, that relocation program was on. The intent, of course, was to get us off into the cities, create a diaspora, and get us off the land. Hello. And as I've stated earlier, and you should all know that, 40% of the natural resource wealth of the continental United States is on or under our meager land holdings. Wow. 50 million acres is all we have. And what is that? 20 million hectares? So, what we have is the grandiose plan. And when they dispersed us on this relocation program, allegedly we have 5 cities to choose from, to go to. BS. They had quota systems they didn't tell us about. Now when they put us out into those cities, they didn't put us in one neighborhood. They dispersed us among all the poorer neighborhoods, the ghettos, the barrios, and where the poor whites lived, and or where the poor whites lived. So that's how we were dispersed. None of our neighbors were American Indian, and our neighbors didn't know anything about us. We were straight from the res, ignorant savages. And we were unsophisticated, very much so, straight from the reservation. What happened is we were forced to find a place to congregate. Some found churches and established their own Indian ecumenical church, or more often they started American Indian centers, that's what they call them, in these respective cities. They started sports teams. That was really the first. They started basketball teams, softball teams, other sports. And we got together. And first we got together athletically, then socially, and then social servicely, provide social services. Because you got relocated, if you went out there for employment, you got a job, then the Bureau of Indian Affairs cuts you loose. That was it. If you lost your job or was laid off for any reason, tough break. So Indian centers began to be formed, and we started social networking. Well, the American Indian movement was one of those, and it happened in Minneapolis, Minnesota in 1978, July. And when they formed as an advocate for Indian people. Because heretofore, like I said, most of them social club or social service club organizations. Bowling leagues, this type of thing. And, well, it's good to have the Indian centers and social services, but there wasn't an advocate for us. And the aim became that. There was some militancy out at Alcatraz Island in the Bay Area on the west coast of the United States, San Francisco Bay Area. But other than that, there wasn't any form of activism until AIM came up. So what we have is a diaspora coming together, and we came together as advocates. And one of our axioms in the American Indian movement is we're only a telephone call away. It started in Minneapolis, and it spread. And Cleveland, where I was from, we became the first AIM chapter outside the state of Minnesota. And boom, it mushroomed like a storm. You know, you can see a storm when a storm's coming. That was AIM, man. And I was part of it. Loved it. And we weren't propagating violence. We're standing up for our rights. We were in a defensive position like we've always been. But that's why we formed AIM. Okay, injustices were all over the country, especially on and near Indian reservations. The racism was manifest. I mean, when after Wounded Knee and all the activism up there and the court cases up in the northern plains, news media came up there. Now these were veterans of Vietnam reporting and of the civil rights struggle in the South reporting. Well, up in the northern plains, they told us, and they even reported on the national news, that there's more racism, more severe racism up in the northern plains than in the South against blacks. I mean, they killed us. They were still killing us. Raymond Yellow Thunder. And you can go on and on and on. The women that were killed outright, raped and killed. Nobody ever prosecuted. So, we're a phone call away. Wesley Badhard Bill got killed. Badhard Bull. Wesley Badhard Bull. Sarah Badhard Bull was the mother. She called us when her son was murdered by a white man in a bar fight. I don't know the criminal circumstances, except for the fact that he was charged with second-degree manslaughter after hunting for an Indian to kill. And that, we had the white men witnesses to the fact he was hunting an Indian that night, hunting for one to kill. What was his name? The white man. At any rate, the point being, he was charged with second-degree manslaughter. So the mother wanted justice. She wanted the charge to be much more severe, because he was facing anywhere from probation to something like 5 or 10 years in prison. And he's a white man in South Dakota. So you know he's going to go free. So we went to try to, with our witnesses, to try to talk to local in Custer, South Dakota. Custer, South Dakota. Named after that loser, General George Armstrong Custer, who got his sensitivity training back in 1876 when he and his men were annihilated after attacking our men, women, and children and old people in a peaceful camp where we had congregated for spiritual reasons on the Little Bighorn. Aside from that, here we go. Custer, South Dakota. This is where Darrell Schmitz, that's the white man's name. Darrell Schmitz was from and where he was charged. So we go up to Custer. The guy tries to act like Custer, the prosecuting attorney, says he can't do it, he's not going to do it. And then they attack us. But they attack Sarah first, the mother. They tear off her jacket and tear up and and tear her blouse. So part of her was exposed. At any rate, when that happened, we went again into the defense, and we started on the police. While they were waiting for that, because that was with the provocation, from the upper stories of the courthouse and from the basement of the court, poured helmeted, face masked, riot stick police. They were ready and waiting for us, man. It was an ambush. That was Custer, South Dakota. Then that led into Wounded Knee. But those are kinds of the things that were happening all the time. At any rate, Wounded Knee happened. Well, the American Indian movement in this area of the United States of America and other places, AIM period, American Indian movement, we got the moniker of violence. And that's how they depict us, you know. They call them Indian wars. Indian wars. Not white man wars. Not U.S. government wars. Not colonial wars. The only colonial war allegedly they had was when they forced their freedom from the King of England. At any rate, and that's a big lie, but that's for another whatever. My point, though, is that we got the moniker of a violent organization. Of course, we're on the defensive, right? We go into Wounded Knee. They say we terrorized the family there. Well, the family was terrorizing the community. You see, back in those days, they had a trader system on the bigger reservations in the western United States. Excuse me. Where these white traders would come in and establish their stores and hold the communities they served in economic bondage. You know, you owed the company store. In other words, you got everything on credit. When your check came in, whether it's Social Security, unemployment, or whatever the check was, welfare, usually welfare, they would even hold the check and have you sign it and then say you owed all the check to the store and even more. You know? It was too much. And if you didn't pay, of course, they confiscated your wealth, which was your feathered bonnets, your beadwork, all your handiworks, all your art. And they put it in a museum and they sold it in glass cases. Then they stole our food. Our government issued food. It was terror. Everyone hated to go to the store because they know they get lectured or treated racistly. It was bad. So we didn't terrorize the family. We went in there to liberate the community from terror. But of course we get the blame. Because our axiom was, you know, no longer are we going to turn the other cheek or bend over and get the other two kicked. That was AIM's axiom. And we didn't. We fought defensively, always defensively. But we didn't turn the other cheek, man. We stood up. Like the people we are, proud. And we got the violence. Well, it turned out to be that academic masturbation exercise was a good forum. We presented ourselves. Doke Shake.